Today, you're going to hear from players directly. This isn't a one-on-one interview on this podcast or anything, but recordings from exit interviews when players were asked about their free agency. I think it's great to convey that information and give my thoughts on what Pacers players said about free agency, and we're going to do all that today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News, and today is a big offseason podcast that I like to do every year. It's one where players speak in their own voices about their upcoming free agency for the Pacers. This is not players coming on the podcast. This is audio from exit interviews. But I like doing this show because it's a good way for fans to hear directly what players said, the cadence, the timing, and I will discuss what was said and what it could mean for the Pacers' prospectus and free agency. So I talked about the summary of this kind of stuff on an exit interview summary podcast last week, but hearing directly from the players, I think, has a lot more value and is a little more important. So we're going to do that today. So we got Jalen Smith's audio, Miles Turner's audio on both Jalen Smith and an extension, Lance Stephenson and O'Shea Brissett, and then at the end I'll talk a little bit about the guys we didn't get, Ricky Rubio, TJ Warren, and then Dwayne Washington and Terry Taylor. So lots to get to today, but it's easier to just jump right in. So first up, Jalen Smith was asked about his upcoming free agency, what his priorities are going to be this summer. Let's hear from him.
Like you said, this is a huge offseason. Scary offseason as well, because obviously as a young player, you don't want to make the wrong decision. And because any decision you can make alters a new path in your life. So pretty much this offseason is going to come down to a lot of thinking, a lot of late night conversations with my agency, my family, and just trying to figure out the right path for me. And at the end of the day, I'm going to do what's best for me. And I feel as though that you just got to be happy with that decision at the end of the day, even though you never know what the future holds. And you just got to be prepared for anything.
How important will fit and opportunity be amongst those key conversation things you consider?
It's going to be very important. I mean, just going in and understanding that you're going to have the opportunity to show yourself and the opportunity to build your reputation and play for your spot and just show what you can do is going to be huge. And then obviously you've got to go somewhere that you're comfortable with and comfortable with the coaching staff and comfortable with every situation around it. So that's going to take a huge factor into it.
So I thought all of that was extremely interesting and insightful from Jalen Smith. Enjoyed his long pause at the beginning while he really figured out what he wanted to say, what he wanted his answers to be about free agency. So the reminder of this situation, for those unaware, Jalen Smith was drafted 10th overall by the Suns in 2020. And when you're drafted in the first round, you get what's called a rookie scale contract, which is 2 guaranteed first seasons, and then a team option for your third and fourth seasons. And that team option is picked up a full year in advance. So your third year team option is picked up after your first season. The Pacers will have that with Chris Duarte and Isaiah Jackson this offseason. The Suns declined Jalen Smith's third-year team option after his rookie year. He didn't play very much for them. He didn't produce very much on the court, and they declined it. That is super rare. It's super rare that first-round picks in general have their third-year option declined. Nonetheless, a lottery pick after 1 year. So stunning decision by the Suns, and that decision carries over if the player is traded. So the Pacers now have Jalen Smith without his third-year option picked up, and what that does is now when he is a free agent, which Jalen Smith is this offseason because that option was declined, the team he was most recently on, which is the Pacers, who inherited his contract decision from the Suns, cannot offer him more than he would have made on that third-year option. And the reason for that rule is what the NBA doesn't want is, I'll just use Zion Williamson as an example, but pick any talented rookie, right? What the NBA doesn't want is the Pelicans draft Zion Williamson, and after the first year, they just decline his third-year option and then immediately give him the max, right? So then teams could just get around the rookie scale completely and give these dudes huge money deals, which would basically not exactly CBA circumvention, but close. They want that rookie scale contract to fit in for every single player picked in the first round. So that's why the rule is in place. And what it means is the Pacers can only offer Jalen Smith 4.7 something million this summer, whereas every other team in the NBA can offer him more than that. And so 4.7 million is maybe enough for him, but maybe not, be given how well he played for the Pacers, really ignited from three, great above the break shooter, decent defender, good mover, decent on the boards. He showed a lot. He showed why he was the 10th overall pick by Phoenix last season, and there will definitely be competition for his services. And I've always thought, there's been a lot of talk of, the Pacers probably can afford him. And I agree that his market value is higher than that 4.76 million number. But I don't think it's impossible the Pacers keep him. I don't think 4.76 million is like a crazy offer. Now, the other thing for the Pacers is they're also limited in year 4 by what the fourth year option for the rookie scale would have been. So even after that first year, they can't just max him out after that. They would still be limited on year 4. So the best they can do for Jalen Smith over the next 2 years is about $10 million. And he could probably get more than that elsewhere. In fact, it's almost, I would say it's more likely than not Jalen Smith does not return to the Pacers. But the key things you hear in there were, he doesn't want to make a mistake and he will do what's best for him, which of course is true for every free agent. They want to really take their time. But someone in his situation who went from maybe the worst possible situation for him, a very, very competitive team that does not give him room to grow, to the opposite situation, a team that had no pressure, a lot of opportunity to grow, that's the team that gave him that opportunity to get money and get more opportunity this summer. So maybe he does view the Pacers as the right fit and opportunity. They just can't offer the money. And if he does return to the Pacers, there'll have to be a lot of trust from the two sides that eventually he will get what he has been owed for a while, because he did mention, an opportunity to show what he can do, building his reputation, right? So if the Pacers say, look, we can give you a ton of minutes, right? We think you can be a 25 minutes a game guy. That probably might not even be enough. But if they wanted to keep him, that is their best pitch, is we will give you the 1+1 with a player option so that if you revert back to your son's stat level or you're shooting from then, you can still get a bunch of money. And if you don't, you can opt out and then pursue other stuff. But we will play you a ton this season, right? That is key to Jalen Smith. And I think that's the key part of this. It's going to be very tough for the Pacers to keep him. I mean, they'll have to offer like a lot of opportunity as well as basically all the money they possibly can to have a chance. And again, I don't think it's impossible, but I do think it's a little unlikely, unless, here's where I do think the Pacers could have a chance, is like if all the cap space teams pick a center. Like if OKC picks Jalen Duren and the Detroit Pistons pick Chet Holmgren, and then like the Spurs get a center they like somehow. There's a lot of ways this could happen. But if all the cap space teams pick a center, I don't think he's going to get the full MLE, which is over $10 million for Jalen Smith. So then I think the Pacers could have more competitive offers. But it seems like a young team with cap space would be the biggest threats for a guy like him, a team that isn't necessarily vying for the playoffs. So if you are a Pacers fan and you would like to see Jalen Smith remain with the Pacers, you are hoping that a lot of these other stinky teams that don't have a ton of front court depth pick centers in the draft or acquire centers early on in free agency so that his options where he can get the perfect fit and opportunity in big minutes dry up. And then the Pacers might have a chance, but they would then also have to come coming with those offers. And then, if you think if you're Jalen Smith's camp and you see Miles Turner still on the team, Isaiah Jackson still on the team, Goga Bitadze still on the team, you might not want to pick the Pacers for fit and opportunity. So I think a lot would have to line up for him to return to the Pacers, but I don't think it's impossible. And I think given his parameters, the things he just claimed that he is, interested in free agency, it is possible if the Pacers could set up the right situation, but a lot would have to kind of fall in domino place for Jalen Smith to return to the Pacers. But take his word for it on what his priorities are and what he thinks, because he did say he wants to be comfortable with the situation and coaching staff, and he did like playing for Indiana. He mentioned that at another point in this exact exit interview, and obviously Carlisle gave him the opportunity to now be making much more than he would have otherwise. So his free agency will be fascinating. Miles Turner offered some advice for him later in his own presser, which I will include here. But I thought Miles Turner's advice for Jalen Smith was also fascinating in this discussion.
Get your money, man. Get your money. At the end of the day, we all play this game for fun, but the underlying thing is that we also come in to take care of our families, to take care of our loved ones, take care of the people around me. So I'm never going to stop a man from getting his bread. As much as I respect his game, as much as I like him here, get your money.
So very insightful and interesting from Miles Turner. Love the both side of the coinism he gave us there, both on the side of, hey, I think every player should get their money. And I, as a viewer of sports, agree with that. And especially in the NBA players' case, when generational wealth on the line, you never know what's going to be out there for you in free agency in other years. Like I know Dennis Schroeder got roasted for what he did, turning down a bunch of money from the Lakers and then getting much less from the Celtics. Like you just never know what's going to be out there for you and how these markets are going to develop. So if you have a chance to get the money, yeah, I'm always receptive to that for players. This is their job, and getting the most possible money and setting yourself up in the best situation should be the ultimate goal. But I also liked Miles saying, yeah, we like him here. We would love to have him back. So if they are able to set up the right situation for Jalen Smith and he returns, I think that makes a lot of sense for the Pacers. But obviously, I think this one is a little complicated because of the contractual situations. And I enjoyed hearing Miles talk about it. Speaking of Miles, He is extension eligible starting on July 1st. Not quite yet, not till the season ends. So he's not a free agent. He will not be a free agent next season either. Next league year either, but he is extension eligible, and he did speak about that. So let's go to Miles Turner next. Before we do that, let's talk about the good folks over at betonline.net, your number one source for all of your sports betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sporting developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball, all over at betonline.net. The Suns and Pelicans are up there for Game 3 of that series. No Devin Booker for the Suns in New Orleans. 1-1 series. Suns favored by 1. That one will be a fascinating one for me to watch going forward. And BetOnline will have that all in there. Your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and more. Head over to that website today, betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action where you can sign up. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Now. Hear the latest and greatest around the league from our local experts covering every team. Get the scoop from Celtics Nets. Get the scoop from every playoff game going on right now. I single out that one because it's happening right now. So Miles Turner, like I just said before the break, is eligible for a contract extension this summer. Here's what he said about his thoughts about potentially getting a longer contract with the Indiana Pacers.
I mean, it's always in the back of my mind, of course. That's not something that I would put my direct focus on right now. It's been a long season, and I'm excited to really excited to take some time to be with my family and whatnot, and then I'll discuss it further whenever that time comes.
So Miles says they'll discuss it when the time comes. He'll probably go away to Dallas, where his family is, or Texas, where his family is, and he's a traveling guy. I think he went to Wyoming a few summers ago, for example. I think he goes somewhere almost every offseason, so who knows exactly where he'll end up. But Miles getting away for a little bit, just like everybody else on the team. Most guys already left town after exit interviews, but he'll discuss it when the time comes. The time can't come till July 1st when the league year rolls over. He is technically not currently extension eligible, though, because he's under contract. That can be discussed. Always on his mind, like you said with Jalen, money's a thing that these guys think about, and I'll be curious how this shakes out because I get why, in theory, Miles would want an extension. Locked into a good salary now, and Bobby Marks laid it out pretty well on ESPN. The Cap God, not to be confused with the Eminem song "Rap God," the Cap God. Miles is eligible for an extension starting again on July 1st. So he could add up to 4 years on his deal. The first year that would have a 20% bump over his $18 million salary plus 8% raises. So from 2023-24 for the next 4 years after that, if he signed a standard extension, he would get about at most. Again, he's not this much of a player, but he could get about a 4-year, $97 million extension as a max, 46.768 or $96.768 million to be exact. Miles Turner is not going to get a 40-year, nearly $100 million extension, of course, but it is something that is possible if the Pacers wanted to pursue that. Maybe a shorter extension would be something Miles would pursue at his current age, and not quite that high of money, but at maybe like $20 million or something per year could be something that would make sense to me. But if you're the Pacers and you have Isaiah Jackson and Goga Bitadze on your team, and maybe Jalen Smith, like we said, with a lot of other factors at play, do you want to lock up your vet big, in your current situation? I don't know, because they could still offer him more than anybody next summer with his full bird rights if he's not traded. So the Pacers, I don't know if they'll necessarily be hugely motivated to extend Miles Turner, but if they do want to truly be as good as has been described, if they want to go back to being a playoff team basically next year, it would make some sense to me to do like a shorter extension with him. Maybe like what Brogdon got last year, 2 years at about his salary figure that he already had going into the year, 2 extra years, right? That would make some sense to me. Add like 2 for $40 onto Miles' deal. But in Miles' case, next summer he'll be a free agent at a great age to be a free agent of 27. He nailed the rookie scale plus extension contract situation. He might find that appealing as well. It's his first time. That would be his first time being an unrestricted free agent ever. So the other thing that's a factor is if the Pacers do opt to be a cap space team, they can do a renegotiation and extension. Thanks again to Bobby Marks for laying this out. Something that's super rare, hasn't happened for a very long time in the NBA. That could allow Miles to if the Pacers have the cap space to do it, they could add on up to like $18 million to his contract and give him up to his max. This year. They shouldn't do that, but they could do that. If you do that, though, you're allowed to scale the salary down by 40% in the next season and add more years to it. So if they wanted to give him a 4-year extension that way, if they wanted to give him the same money his max extension could be, they could give him a $32.9 million deal in the upcoming season, and then that would drop down to 19, 21, 22 for the 3 seasons after. And that would total that $96.7 million that he could get on his max standard extension. So about the same total money, but one less year. I suppose if Miles and the Pacers both decide, we think you're a $100 million 4-year player, maybe that would be a better route for them. They don't have necessarily an awesome use for their cap space this summer, just because they're in an awkward spot between wanting to grow and be better, but also being a young team that just won 25 games. So maybe they could do something like that just to get him on a little more favorable contract. And if you're Miles, you now get the same amount of guaranteed money and get to be a free agent again when you're 29 instead of 30. That makes a little bit of sense to me. Obviously not those large of numbers, but at some scale similar to that, whatever they determine his agreed upon price to be over the next 4 seasons, 80 million, 60 million, whatever it is. I just am using the max numbers, but fit it in those parameters. It can be up to 4 years and up to 96 million. You do the math on your own end. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense for either party. Again, Miles being an unrestricted free agent next summer makes a lot of sense for the first time. He could even still return if things go well with the Pacers. They could offer more money than any team with his full bird rights. No issues there if he truly wants to stay. And from the Pacers side, again, they have young centers right there in the fold. They really want to be committing to their 27-year-old who isn't necessarily on the same timeline as a lot of the rest of their currently projected to be high minutes players next season. It doesn't make perfect sense to me. So it is an option, and I wanted to include it in here because I'll probably do a full detailed podcast on this at some point, but I don't think it's something that will ultimately happen. So that's the Miles Turner extension situation. I hope that makes sense. If not, please hit me up on Twitter at TEastNBA. I can explain it more in full, or read Bobby Marks in ESPN. Let's move on to Lance Stephenson, a fan favorite coming off of a minimum contract. His free agency answer admittedly a little hazy, but I will allow Lance Stephenson to describe his thoughts on his upcoming free agency.
It's going to be a great, interesting free agency. So I'm just looking forward to it. Just keep my body strong and sharp. I'm very mad that the season is actually over because I feel great right now. I feel like I could keep going. So, man, I just want to stay in this type of shape that I am right now and just continue to just get my body stronger.
So unfortunately, not a lot there from Lance. Kind of a lot of nothing, to be fair. His situation is fascinating as he enters free agency, right? Coming off of a minimum deal signed mid-season, and it's an interesting spot for him. And I get why, maybe he doesn't have the most concrete knowledge of what exactly his future could hold with the Pacers. Because look at the Pacers right now, right? In theory, Tyrese Halliburton, Chris Duarte, TJ McConnell, guys already under contract, Buddy Hield, as guards next season. It's already crowded. That does not include the draft or anyone they bring in. Brogdon's in the fold. Dwayne Washington is in the fold, just for example, right? So they were able to play Lance a lot, with McConnell on the shelf, with Brogdon missing a bunch of time, when Dwayne Washington hadn't quite fully proven himself. And Kiefer Sykes was on the team as well. They were playing Kiefer with Lance at times as well, right? They found ways to get Lance minutes with a lot of shifting guard responsibilities last year. Next year, you'd imagine that a lot of those guys, if they're back, would have bigger roles or revert to the roles in McConnell's case and Brogdon's case that they had prior to injury or prior to being shut down for the season. And if that is the case, it's a lot harder to find Lance minutes. So I understand that maybe the Pacers say we don't need a guard that's just going to sit on our bench. That said, fan favorite, ignites passion from the fan base, and on a minimum deal as your 15th man, it doesn't hurt a thing, right? Maybe he's in camp. Who knows exactly what his situation is? So I'd understand the Pacers bringing him back, especially if they, if McConnell gets traded or if Brogdon gets traded and they don't draft a guard, and all of a sudden there maybe is the need for an emergency point guard. You bring back Lance because, look, he had his best passing season of his career this season, quite frankly, by the numbers. Like, he looked a lot better as a point guard and was really ignited in that role. So it would make some sense for the Pacers to bring him back. They have the means to do so. Any team can sign a minimum contract. They could give him a bump with non-bird rights, with cap space, whatever. They have a lot of ways to keep him if they are so inclined. But the problem is, even if you just strip away the veterans, they would still have, Duarte and Washington and Halliburton on the team. That's pre-draft, right? It's not the easiest thing in the world to find minutes for him, but as a fan favorite who people love to watch and went crazy for all season, it would, it's not. And he was legitimately good, especially on offense, as a bench player for the Pacers this past season. So it makes sense to bring him back, but I get necessarily some hesitancy from both sides. Like, if you're Lance and you're just coming back to be the 15th man, who knows, right? Because he loves playing. He went the whole G League route. Like, if he could get more minutes somewhere else, maybe. But I think he would like to be back, right? He has said that he loves Indiana. He would love to play for this team. He wants to keep playing, like he just said, as you heard in his answer. So I think there is a fit if both sides can agree to something, but obviously a little tricky just given the Pacers roster makeup. And then they don't have a ton of roster spots available this offseason, given the number of free agents they have and the number of draft picks they have. So it'll be a fascinating situation. I think Lance's ultimate situation with the Pacers could end up depending on other moves that get made. But that, again, we'll do a full podcast on Lance's upcoming free agency and what the Pacers should or should not consider with him. Let's talk about the last guy, O'Shea, and hear from him. And then we'll pivot to the guys that didn't talk very briefly at the end of the show. But really quick, before we do that, I want to talk to you guys about the good folks over at Built Bar, who are making the best tasting protein bars ever. I'm not just saying that. Tons of Locked On Pacers listeners have tweeted at me and said that they love them and they keep getting different flavors and trying them. For example, someone told me last month that the St. Patrick's Day limited time flavor was awesome, right? So they are really popular amongst listeners. What are they? Well, they're protein bars that are actually good. The ones you get in the store, chalky, plasticky, rubbery. It doesn't make sense to chew them, and they don't taste that good for what they are. Built Bars are delicious, 100% covered in chocolate. Basically tastes like a candy bar, protein bars that come in so many awesome flavors. The cinnamon churro is really great. Coconut marshmallow is great. My favorite, the peanut butter brownie. But there's a bunch. You can see them all on the website. And while you're on the website, you can also see all the macros for how healthy they are. Low calorie, high protein, 100% covered in chocolate bars that have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein in most of them. You've got to try them. It's basically a candy bar that's good for you. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. That promo code, again, is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NBA. Hear about all the action around the league. Last night, there was a lot of action in the playoffs last night. Let's get to the last guy who spoke at media day, or excuse me, exit interview day. That was wrong. O'Shea Brissett, who has an interesting situation. He might be a free agent. He might not be. He's got a team option in his contract. To hear him break down his situation in free agency.
Nah, I haven't at all. I haven't even thought about it. I remember, start of the year, I didn't even know my contract was like, there was a date for it to be guaranteed. I had no idea until people texted me the day saying congrats. I was like, congrats on what? I was really confused. But no, I haven't thought about it, man. I tried to leave that stuff out. I know whatever I do on the court is going to get me whatever I do, whatever I deserve out there. I don't really think about it. I love it here. I want to be here. Like I said, I wouldn't be who I am now if it wasn't for the Mad Ants, and I definitely wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for the Pacers. So, this is where I want to be. I love it here. And whatever happens, happens.
It did make me laugh when O'Shea noted that he didn't know about his non-guaranteed deal last year. So on, January 7th, the day that if he didn't get cut, his deal would be fully guaranteed for the season. Him and Kiefer Sykes both not getting waived that day, guaranteed both of their deals. And there was no doubt he would get it. But I thought it's funny that he didn't realize why everybody was texting him. And look, he was never going to get waived, right? His contract was obviously going to be guaranteed last year. And he's a talented player. And that's why, right? It makes sense. And that's why his team option is interesting. And I've explained this on the show before, but I will do it again just in the context of what he just said. The reason they haven't really had discussions with Brissett is they don't really have to, right? They have a team option on his contract heading into next season. And it's for a minimum deal, the one he signed a couple seasons ago, coming off of, if you'll recall, that really, really good stint he had with the Madden, right? He was their best player in the G League bubble a few years ago under Tom Hankins. The Pacers scoop him on a 10-day. He looks great on the 10-day. And then he gets another 10-day, and then he gets a 3-year deal at the end of that with the second year non-guaranteed and a team option and non-guaranteed on the third year of that deal, right? So great bit of work by the Pacers to identify him, and O'Shea obviously thrilled to get a deal in the NBA after getting cut by the Raptors at the beginning of that season. Something happened in camp there that got him out because he had a sizable guarantee and didn't make the Raptors team, and he got so much of a guarantee he couldn't sign a two-way with them or anyone else after that. So going through the G League and then getting that deal with the Pacers was big for him. So the decision the Pacers have to make is if they pick up the team option, $1.85 million next year, total cheapo deal. Then great, they have O'Shea Brissett on the minimum and they do their thing next year. And then he's not a free agent at all. And this whole discussion is stupid and pointless, but it's always good to have good players for cheap. But at the end of that year, he would be an unrestricted free agent, free to sign with whatever team he chooses, as he just noted in that segment, loves Indiana, and especially so because they were the team that kind of identified his talent and let him kind of grow into the player he is, a lock NBA player for the next few seasons. But the other idea the Pacers could have is if they decline his team option, what they can do is give him a qualifying offer in free agency and make him a restricted free agent. If he takes that qualifying offer, then it's another 1 year on a cheapo deal for him. But in the case of Brissett, by getting the qualifying offer offered to him, he would then have the ability to, the Pacers could match and keep him for sure, but he could then negotiate a different deal with the Pacers. And so for a guy that is clearly deserving of a different deal, or at least more money than the minimum, that might make some sense too. And for the Pacers, if they don't want to lose him, having him a restricted free agent instead of an unrestricted free agent would clearly have value to them in the front office. I would think they decline it just because they have cap space now and it doesn't hurt. And it's not like, you bump him up to $5 or $6 million a year. That's really going to cripple your team building in the future. I would get why they might not, just because he's not like so great that you'd be devastated to lose him. But he is good, and he's younger than Chris Duarte, right? Like he is in their core age of the team they're trying to build, right? So it does make sense why he would be a part of this team going forward, even just as a bench player. But having him in restricted free agency guarantees they could have him next season, even if he just takes the qualifying offer, right? So I think that it makes sense to turn down the team option, but I get why they would pick it up just because a minimum contract good player is always valuable to have. But like I've explained this on the show before, the most extreme edition of this was Nikola Jokic with the Nuggets. They had a 4th-year cheapo team option on him. The Nuggets declined it and then gave him the max as a restricted free agent because you cannot risk losing Nikola Jokic as a team. You just can't. So I think they'll turn it down and then give him a qualifying offer, but I would understand both sides of this, and that is why it is a decision. And I think it's funny that from O'Shea's side, he said, I haven't really thought about it. Well, he doesn't really have to, right? Like it almost is a certainty, unless he's traded, he'll be back with the Pacers next year just because, like I said, his age and his talent makes a lot of sense, but because they can make him restricted or pick up the team option, like there's not a lot of ways he would be on another team barring a trade. And for a guy that, across the last 2 seasons with the Pacers, just shy of 10 points per game, over 5 rebounds per game, quality team defender, shot 37% from 3 across the last 2 seasons, like that's a solid player, even if it's just as a bench forward. And that's on 300 3-point attempts, right? So he's a decent shooter, quality defender, and having him on a cheapo deal guaranteed next year, plus maybe more than that if you decline it and then negotiate a longer deal. That makes a lot of sense to me from a Pacers perspective. That's the last player we got to talk to about their free agency at exit interviews. Dwayne Washington and Terry Taylor, the two-way guys who just signed new deals, can, in theory, become free agents this offseason. They both have deals that are strangely guaranteed. Dwayne Washington, his full deal becomes guaranteed on July 6th at $1.6 million, his minimum. And then Terry Taylor, who has $625,000 guaranteed, the whole thing becomes guaranteed on July 10th, right? And I don't think that, given the way they played last year, that they would not be on the Pacers next year. It would be slashed from those deals. So I didn't even bother to ask them, and they're not even technically free agents because their dates are after the July rolls over. Like they could start the next league year on the Pacers before getting cut. There's not much to preview with them. I think they'll both be back with the team unless they are traded, similar to that Brissett discussion just now. Is it possible? I mean, yeah, but there's no real value. What are you going to get better with a minimum contract? Like they're both in the rotation for the Pacers this year and close to the level of a rotation player as a rookie. If they get better in the same system working out with an NBA team instead of doing pre-draft workouts all summer, it seems like in theory they would be better, especially as they grow into their bodies. So I mean, there's not a lot of discussion with them. It doesn't make sense for the Pacers to not bring them back unless they get a slam dunk use of a minimum's more cap space, and that seems extremely, extremely unlikely at this stage. TJ Warren is a weird one, and Ricky Rubio, they're both free agents. They're both not at exit interviews. We couldn't ask them or get their audio for this segment, which is unfortunate. We haven't talked to TJ Warren in ages because he missed the whole season. The last time we talked to him, I think, was Media Day in September of 2021. When there was a chance he was going to play during the season. And look, his is a very complicated thing. I've talked about that. I think what makes sense for him is a kind of complicated contract with a lot of unlikely bonuses. About 15% of his money can be unlikely bonuses, as well as an option of some kind so that if things go wrong with his injury, the parties can get out of it, but also it's a chance to add guaranteed money to the deal. I think that makes some sense for him, and I think it makes sense for him to come back to the Pacers. They have no wings at all. But if they are not trying to be awesome next year, why risk it? It could be a great way for the Pacers as a team that is in theory potentially trying to rebuild, if they do go that route, to have a really great contract on a guy who could be really valuable to a contender. So it makes sense if he wants to be back for the Pacers to keep him. To me, it's just the contract will have to probably be pretty complicated, and that makes it hard to exactly project where both parties would go. But, there was the Athletic report last year about the Pacers changing direction, which ultimately happened. And TJ Warren was cited by sources in that as saying a guy who would like to be back in Indiana. That makes a lot of sense to me, given the comments that he has shared publicly, given the Pacers situation, that they would like to have TJ Warren back. At just negotiating that contract will be challenging. Ricky Rubio doesn't really make sense to return to the Pacers. Like we talked about with Lance, already really crowded backcourt rotation for the Pacers. Ricky Rubio, why would he fit into their plans? That wouldn't make a ton of sense unless he's the backup point guard. But then, who is Brogdon and McConnell gone and Lance not in their plans? It doesn't make sense that he would be on the Pacers next year in Ricky Rubio's case unless all those guys are gone. But his free agency for Ricky Rubio is more about a sign and trade situation, right? Coming off that torn ACL. If he's going to be healthy by opening night, which is possible, that'd be 10 months post-surgery, although it's tough. It's more likely to be a mid-season thing. But can they use his salary in a sign and trade that is productive? That's why they kept him throughout the remainder of the whole season with his free agency coming up, is for that potential possibility. So I think that would be a whole other podcast too. But can they find a way to sign and trade him? Maybe for other crappy money that's shorter, but that would help another team potentially have a backup point guard or have assets swap in a correct way. I don't think there's a chance Ricky Rubio's on the Pacers next year unless a ton of other guards are dealt and none are drafted by the Pacers. But he still could have some value in sign and trade situations this offseason. That's the free agency preview. At the end, it was not in their voices, unfortunately, but I hope you guys learned something today about the players, what their priorities are, and about their free agencies from me explaining the situations to you. And all these guys will get their own individualized podcast about the considerations of their free agency. Thank you all so much for listening. This episode takes a lot of producing time to put together, so I would love it if you guys enjoyed it. And everybody have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. Got a guest coming to talk about Rick Carlisle's first season, so it should be great. And we will see you then.